Welcome to my YouTube video all about how to grow anemones, and I've brought my camera this week to the flower farm, and here you can see in the background we have 2 rows of anemones, and this is how we grow them here in Devon. So no protection. We are stood next to a polytunnel, so if you hear that noise, that's the wind on the plastic, apologies. No protection at all. They're outside all year round. We keep these beds planted, we don't dig them up. So they are a perennial bed. When you first get your anemones, and I have just dug a couple up just to show you, you will receive what's called a corm, and it looks a little bit, I don't know if you can see it in there, a little bit like a rabbit dropping. When you receive it, you want to soak it in water for 4 hours, 5 hours, and then you want to plant it. We start our anemone corms actually in August. We plant them out, they sit there and they don't do a lot. They put up all their leaves and they actually start to flower for us here in Devon from December. But the flowers aren't perfect. We get quite a lot of what's known as blind anemones this time of year, and it's a reaction to the cold. So I have a few stems that look like this, no flower, tiny bit of colour, but no flower at all. So that's no good to me as a flower farmer. I don't want these stems, but it's okay because it's still too early in the season. I've got no use for them at the moment, but they are producing flowers. They have got no protection whatsoever. We've had -7, -5 to -7 down here recently. I have not gone with any spacing at all in these beds. They are really close together. They throw up these stems, which start off looking a little bit like snake heads. Let me show you. Well, they remind me of snakes anyway. They come up like this and they get taller and taller and taller, and we pick them. The optimum time to pick them is when this head has straightened out and is pointing towards the sky. That is the best time to pick them. This ruff, which goes around the flower, and I'm just looking for an example. I'll go off and find one and bring it back. This ruff needs to still be directly attached to the flower at the top, and I'll show you what I mean in my later video, which I'll put on the end of this one, about how to arrange with them. Any questions, just let me know, but I hope that shows you how we grow them here, and with any luck in about 4 to 6 weeks we'll be harvesting bucket loads of different coloured anemones from these 2 beds. Here's an anemone that's at the right time to pick. Hasn't opened yet, it's almost straightened right out. I would pick this one. It has got the ruff, which is this bit around here, I call it the ruff, is still attached to the petals, and that's important because I'll show you why in my other video where I show some anemones that are a week old that we harvested last week, and it's a good way for you to tell how old your flowers are if you're buying anemones as a cut flower. The other point was pests and diseases. Touch wood, I've never had an issue with anything. Slugs do like them when the shoots first start. We don't use any pesticides at all on our flower farm, so it's a little bit survival of the fittest. Also, there's a big banquet there for the slugs. They don't seem to get through all of them. So it comes with the territory. I don't worry about it too much. The other thing is, if you're growing them where you have a problem with deer or squirrels, I know that squirrels definitely like to dig them up and eat them. We don't have that issue here, but that's something to watch out for if you do grow them. You could, if you wanted to, lift your corms in the autumn, and you can divide them. You can divide when the corms get really big underground, a bit like a bulb, but like a long, well, like I said, like a rabbit poo. When they get really long, you can divide them up and make more of them. We haven't got to that point yet. This bed's 2 years old, and I haven't thought about doing that yet, but I'm sure they will end up overcrowded, and perhaps if it ends up this bed doesn't turn out as many anemones as I want, then perhaps we'll go through that process and we'll dig them up and we will propagate from them, divide them, and create more beds of them. But yeah, I hope that's helpful. This variety is from Italy. They're called Mistral anemones. They're the really big florist grade anemones, but you can grow all different varieties, especially if they're for your garden. You might not want the really big ones, but they come in all ranges of colours as well. I hope that's helpful. Hello, hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week I was going to talk to you about anemones, and so hopefully you've already watched the first part, which I filmed in the field. This is the second part about how to care for your cut flower anemones. There are 3 different types of anemones you may know. There are wood anemones, which grow in the forest. They're very low to the ground, little tiny yellow flowers. There are these anemones, which you grow from corms, little brown acorns. You plant them either in the autumn or the spring, and they throw up these beautiful flowers, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 stems per plant. Really, really beautiful. And then there are Japanese anemones, which we see in the autumn. Sometimes they're called wind flowers, and they grow in drifts. They're really beautiful, tend to naturalize and spread really, really easily. But when you talk about anemones, sometimes people talk about different ones, but these are the anemones I'm here to talk to you about today. We grow ours here in Devon outdoors all year round. I leave the corms in to perennialise the entire bed, and you should have seen on my video earlier how close together we grow our stems. This one, for example, it's got a little twist in it, but I love that about our flowers. There's nothing purely straight here, but they grow, you can see the varying height there. Nothing different at all, that's just from 2 different colour bulbs, and they vary, the stem length varies, so they can be a little bit shorter, a little bit taller. Definitely, if you give them cover and you give them a little bit of heat, they will grow taller for you. I've had them in the polytunnel and they've had really lovely long stems. It just depends on where you've got space to grow them. So I've had these in my kitchen all week, and I thought it's about time I sorted them out. I refreshed the water in my jug and I gave the ends a bit of a trim and went through the flowers. And I thought it was a great opportunity to actually share that with you. So you can see the different varieties, the different colours. We have some red ones planted. This is, oh, that's grape, that one there. I don't know if you can see that very well with the light, but such a beautiful deep colour. We have the black and white, that's not a great example. This is a black and white, and you can see in the cold weather, especially early on in the season, the petals on the other side get this gorgeous pink veining, which is so lovely. But this is the black and white anemone. These are all corms from Italy. They're the Mistral varieties, which tend to have really big heads. The Italian varieties tend to be really lovely, big versions for the florists to play with, so they're the ones we grow. Just see if there's any other colours. There's a this is Azzurro, which this is because it's very early on in the season. We tend to get these slight differences in see the petals. These have grown very big, and then this is very small. That's just a reaction to the cold because it's been so cold recently. The flowers just got a distorted growing habit, which is fine because we're not selling anemones at the moment. This is just a few for my kitchen table, so I don't mind that. This one which I didn't show you, I'll tell you why this is not a brilliant example of an anemone and what's happened. If you look at this one and look at the centre and look at this one, this is what I want it to look like. Here again, we've got what's called almost, sometimes they come up blind. So it's almost run out of time to form its flower. It's gone into panic mode, it's gone cold again, and it hasn't fully formed. So there's an example of what almost a blind anemone would look like. And it's these, like I say, these early stems, when they're cold, they tend to do that. And I had a great example. Here's one where the petals are too small, they're not going to open. So you can see there's a blind version, another one. So these are flowers that, because it's so early on in the season, anemones will throw up these blind stems. Don't panic about that, just cut them as normal. It's important with anemones that you keep cutting the flowers. So go right down close to the ground, cut as close as you can, but be very careful, because where that stem is coming up from the ground, the new one is ready. It's ready coming off the corm already, and it's bent over. If you knock that off, you'll knock your next flower stem off. So just be very careful when you're harvesting. Cut them regularly, like you're deadheading, and before you know it, as soon as that warmer weather and the light levels increase, you'll be getting stem after stem after stem, and they're so beautiful. Another thing with anemones, and a good way of telling how old they are, if you're buying them as a cut flower, can you see this little ruff here? And this is a good example. If I show you this one, this ruff is very close to the petals, and you see there's a little bit of stem in between there. When you're buying anemones as a cut flower, you want that ruff as close to the petals as possible, if not almost completely joined. Can you see here, the ruff has started to really extend down the stem. That's showing me that's an older anemone. So I know that flower's maybe too old to be being sold. Certainly I would never sell anybody an anemone as a cut flower, because it's not going to last as long. However, if you are a florist and you want anemones to be open and beautiful and ready for your bride on her wedding day, you might want a slightly more older anemone. And the reason for that is anemones react to light and they close when it's nighttime, and they open up in the day. So as with all cut flower sales, it does depend on who your final customer is. Normally, my final customers are people who want flowers for the table. They've got to last at least a week, 2 weeks. And so I am looking for the freshest flower possible. Now I'm going through these anemones and I'm pulling out some where they've been in my kitchen all week and there's no rescuing these are going on the compost. So I'm taking those out, looking a bit sorry for themselves. And all I'm going to do with the ones that are still absolutely fine, and you can see this one's a lot smaller, so we wouldn't be selling this one, but it's fine for me. This goes for all cut flowers. If you've had them on your kitchen side for longer than a couple of days, that water's going to need refreshing. You need to wash out your container. Bacteria in water is the first thing that will kill your cut flowers and mean they don't last as long. Replace it every day if you can. If you need to, if you want to keep the water extra squeaky clean, you can put a tiny little bit of bleach in the water. I don't do that, but it's absolutely, you can, and I know people do. The other thing to do is to take each flower, if you've been bought a bouquet and it's come ready wrapped and you've shoved it straight in the vase, absolutely, I get you, do it, why not? The florist has taken time to make your bouquet, plop it straight in the water. You can grab that whole bouquet, take it, snip all the ends together, keep it all tied together, job done. However, if you've bought them loose, and these we picked loose, you might want to just do each one at a time. And I'm just going to take my stem, I'm going to cut it at an angle and pop it straight in the water. And what that's going to do is it's going to reopen the capillaries. It means my anemone is able to take up more water and hopefully will last a little bit longer in the vase for me. And they're so beautiful and the colours are amazing. And I love the middles, they're just such a beautiful contrast. I can see these are older. Can you see the middle of that one? You can see the pollen in the middle has started to spread all over the petals. So you can see that's an older anemone. When they first open it up, that pollen hasn't spread anywhere yet because it hasn't started to develop properly. Anemones are such long-lasting flowers, 2 weeks plus, amazing value for money, amazing. And they're starting to be available now, especially from the Cornish growers who tend to have a couple of weeks even on us here in Devon earlier. So yeah, definitely look out for them if you can get them. We will be selling them very soon, but not quite yet, and especially if this cold weather continues. It's been so cold this week in Devon, and even now my fingers feel really cold. Now there's nothing special in my vase, it's just clean water. I'm plonking them in. It's an old vase, I think I got it from TK Maxx maybe, can't remember. It's nothing special at all, but I just want these just for us on the table to brighten up January. I love the red one, so beautiful. I'm going to pop them in. I'm not looking at where I'm putting the colours, I'm literally just wherever they fall, that's how I want them to look, because they are that type of flower. They're beautiful, they're graceful, they arch. That one's had a bit of an accident. What I might be able to do is cut it off, and I'm just going to tuck it down. And that's the other thing with anemones to watch. They drink water like mad. You'll think, oh, it can't need replacing, and they have drunk your entire vase. So check them. They are thirsty, thirsty flowers. But that goes with all cut flowers, really. Essentially, you've bought something that's on its way to the compost heap, and your job as the receiver of them is to keep them alive as long as possible, and really looking after them. And I mean changing the water every day. My mum is brilliant at this. I mean, she really is the absolute carer for all things houseplants and cut flowers. My mum will keep flowers going for weeks, and she does it because she cleans her vases perfectly and she changes the water every day. She says it's like looking after houseplants. You have to literally give them your attention every day. Now I get it, we don't all have time for that. I totally understand, me included. But if I didn't pass it along, I wouldn't be a good flower farmer. Look at the stem on that, that's just crazy. And that's what's brilliant. If you get the opportunity to buy locally grown flowers, they're not grown for the supermarkets, they're not grown in huge great greenhouses that are artificially heated. They are literally normally grown outside in fields, and you don't get that crazy wave on your stems without going to your local flower farmer. So absolutely, I embrace all wavy stems because that is how nature wanted to grow it, and that is okay with me. We don't have any support for our anemones. I find the stems are really, really good on their own. Don't tend to use any netting or anything, they don't need it. So I don't recommend it. Perhaps if you grew them indoors, perhaps if they grew very fast and they got a little bit floppy, but I've never had a problem. There we go, all done. And that is their second week now. They're gonna come into my kitchen and probably give me another week at least of joy and brighten up my January. I hope that's really helpful and I've answered all your questions. Anything I've missed out, do let me know. Yeah, very open to chatting flowers all the time. Okay, right, I'm gonna go and have my dinner. Nice.